All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to this interview with Michael Taylor, an author, a coach, an entrepreneur, and he's got a really exciting book coming out that he told me about a few months ago, and I was like, "Will you let me write the forward for that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I was going to ask you the same thing." So his book is called The New Face of Entrepreneurship, which, you know, elicits like, oh, well, what's the old face? And I want to know what the new face looks like. And when you see when you see the cover of the book, you'll get actually what he's talking about because it really is a new face. So, Michael, it's great to have, excuse me, it's great to have you here and welcome.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to share this message and to work together in doing what you and I both committed to, which is empowering and transforming the world. So I couldn't have asked for a better guy to write the forward. And it's amazing how that kind of happened. But again, I don't believe in accidents, and the universe was supporting me and was allowing me to connect with you. And here we are doing this interview. So thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.
You got it, Michael. You got it. And looks like we had Joe Bell joining us as well. So Michael, first question: what do you mean by the new face of entrepreneurship? Like, what does that actually mean for you?
Well, let me back up a little bit and first of all say I am an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. And I don't buy into all the negative media pessimism and cynicism. I believe there has never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. Mm-hmm. And so what I see is an evolution, if you will, an evolution of consciousness, an evolution of human beings. But speaking from the standpoint of America in general, if you look at the changing faces or the new face of entrepreneurship, because the racial makeup is changing so drastically, everything is shifting. And so what I'm seeing is the new face are definitely people of color, definitely women who are obviously making lots of strides in America. And so the demographics are changing. And so the new face, if you look at the cover, you might notice that there's actually more women than men on the cover. Nice. Because again, I think societally, women are just really blazing new trails. And despite all the negative stuff we see in the media, I believe women are really opening some new doors and shifting the consciousness of the planet, which is really exciting. So that's what I mean by the new face of entrepreneurship, because the two primary markets for the book are millennials. And of course, I think millennials are having a new approach to life and being an entrepreneur in general. And also for the baby boomers who are retiring and wondering what's next and trying to figure out what they want to do. Well, entrepreneurship is a great path for both of those groups. So that's who the book is targeted to.
Awesome. Now, I think a lot of folks have some misconceptions around what it means to be an entrepreneur. You started to share some of that in your book. Like, people think you have to have a college degree, that you have to have a lot of money, that there's all this stuff you have to do in order to run your own business. And I would love it if you would just share a little bit of like what's really true now. 2018, we've got, boomers coming online, millennials, probably soon zennials. We've got a much more diverse entrepreneurial roadmap. But what are actually the new assumptions? What's the new reality for being an entrepreneur right now?
Well, here's my definition of an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is simply someone who receives compensation in exchange for a product or service. Now, we have to break down the word compensation because I believe there are three primary types of compensation. There's financial compensation, emotional compensation, and spiritual compensation. And so traditionally, when we think of entrepreneurs, we think financial. We are starting business to make a lot of money. And that's kind of the old model, if you will. And then you have people that start businesses or become entrepreneurs who do it primarily for the emotional reasons. For example, most nonprofits, I think, are driven by emotions because they want to make a difference in the world. They're not really concerned about making a profit, but it makes them feel good. And then you have the spiritual compensation. And for me, spiritual compensation kind of leads into what you teach, which is purpose. If you recognize and identify with a power greater than yourself, and you have this intimacy and connection with that power, then spiritual compensation is your way of sharing your gifts and talents with the world in recognition of your connection to that power. And so for me, when I think about what I call the NFE, the New Face Entrepreneur, they're able to balance all three of those. We reprioritize.
Yeah.
For me, it's spiritual first, emotional second, financial third. And I think if we prioritize that way, and again, find our passions and find what drives us and make a commitment to making the world a better place and do things that we feel good about, money will follow.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly what the research says. You know, it talks a lot about when people know their purpose, they have a higher level of leadership effectiveness, more engagement, more productivity. And I really like how you've kind of languaged this, that there's this kind of transcendent piece of being an entrepreneur. There's the kind of the, you know, the emotional drive, like what has you be excited about it. And then of course, you know, we all need to eat, and it'd be nice to make money for taking our entrepreneurial risks. Now, you came into this book after, this is your what, fourth book or fifth book?
Seventh.
Oh, seventh. That's right. But you had that goal of what, 5 books in 5 years, and this is
4 years ago I made a commitment, and I set the intention to challenge myself to write a book a year for 5 years. And I wanted to see if I could keep that commitment to myself. And so far I've done that. This is year number 4. This is book number 4. I'm already set up for book number 5 for next year, and I'm probably will do a book a year for the next 5 years because I got so many ideas just kind of in my head. But it was really a personal challenge to myself just to see if I could pull it off. But what's amazing, Brandon, is that when I set the intention 5 years ago, I set up a system where every September I write a book. And so I've got into this flow that connected to what I call my source. I set aside a certain amount of time. I sit down and I start writing, and I literally download the book. It's amazing how the process works. So again, this is number 4 of a commitment of 1 book a year for 5 years. And I'm pretty proud to say that I've kept that commitment to myself.
That's great. That's great. Well, you know, you've used the word spirit and spiritual a couple times, and I personally have no problem with that. And that actually one of the things that makes me excited about the book, other than, you know, when I did a word search and found the word purpose in there like over 100 times, that excited me a lot too. But you know, there aren't a lot of spiritual entrepreneur books, and I'm curious, like, you know, do you think the average entrepreneur or like new entrepreneurs are going to be like, this is what I want. I want a business that also is like my spiritual expression. What do you think about that?
Well, again, if my belief is that, again, humanity is still evolving. I think we're still evolving in consciousness. And so, you know, Barbara Marx Hubbard says that human beings are evolving to what she calls Homo universalis.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea, that as human beings, we're evolving in consciousness, and what we're evolving to, this universal human, if you will. And so whether an entrepreneur recognizes it or not, I believe there's this new birth that's happening, that we're waking up to something deeper. We're waking up to more rewarding and fulfilling and purpose-driven lives. And so I think it's inevitable for it to happen. And I think that's why this book is going to be so appealing, because first of all, I make some huge distinctions about spirituality and religion. Mm-hmm. And so for me, as a former atheist, which is actually amazing that I even talk about spirit when I was such a devout atheist at one particular point in my life. But see, Michael Taylor's definition of God is the divine energy and intelligence that created and is still creating this amazing universe. That's how I define God. Now, we get tripped up by that word a lot, obviously, because it has a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. And so for me, as I mentioned, because of my belief in this divine energy and intelligence, it's what drives everything for me now. It's the reason that I wake up every morning. It's the reason that I have a smile on my face 90% of the time. It is my connection to that which is greater than myself, which lights me up from inside. And so again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the younger generation, that are looking for deeper experiences, because I read, I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the statistic, but the young millennials are looking more for experiences versus stuff.
Yep.
When I grew up, I was more interested in stuff. How could I get the big house? How could I get the nice car, take the vacations and all of that? And that's what was driving me, the stuff. I
Yep.
didn't have a spiritual connection. Well, that's one of the reasons why my life was so empty. And that's another reason why I know that I went through a lot of adversities in my life, because the universe had to wake me up. And it took some drastic measures to do that. But once I did wake up, everything kind of fell into place.
Well, I love that how you said that about like young people and entrepreneurs, like kind of wanting the experience, like wanting the aliveness. Like when I first left investment bank, I mean, investment banking had a lot of like action, like there was a lot of deadlines and pressure and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't really aliveness. And I started to feel a little bit of it in the startup scene, because even though, still like 95% of it is just agitating electrons, like doesn't really change anything. Just who gets the ad dollars basically. But or the subscription fees. But because there was that kind of like, okay, we've got a goal, we've got a limited amount of resources, it was like this problem to be solved that kind of gave people this experience of being alive. I think you're taking it like to the next level, saying like it's not just about making the business work, but it's about kind of self-actualizing, like becoming really who you are, as you say, that divine purpose in your business.
Yeah, and I think my life is actually a perfect metaphor for entrepreneurs, because I've known since I was 10 years old that I want to be an entrepreneur. Since I was 10.
Yeah.
And here's a unique story that goes with that. When I was 10 years old, I remember walking up to my grandfather, and my grandfather was the most amazing, intelligent guy that I've ever known. He taught me so many lessons. And I've read literally hundreds and hundreds of books. But my grandfather, who only had an 8th grade education, he gave me the keys to life in 2 simple lessons. I walked up to my grandfather and I said, Grandpa, you know what? When I grow up, I'm going to be rich. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to own my own company. I'm going to be a businessman. He said, that's a great goal. He says, now, if you want to be rich, I'm going to tell you the 2 things that you have to do. Now, you got to remember, this is back in the 60s. Okay? Yeah. He looked at me and he said, if you're going to be rich, the first thing you got to do is you got to learn to think like the white man.
Wow.
No, listen to this. This is what he said. He said, now, I'm not telling you to try to be something that you're not. He said, but if you want to be rich, you got to think like people who are rich. And he said, who's got all the money? The white man. I said, okay, I get that. I get that. So that was the first lesson. He said, basically, and this is what he taught me, it's all in how you think. Okay? He taught me that very early. And the second thing he said is, you simply have to learn how to listen. He said, because rich people will tell you how they got rich. You just have to pay attention to what they're telling you. And the way you do that is you read their stories. You learn from them. You follow their example. He said, you do those 2 things, you can do anything you want.
Wow.
Now, when I was, again, around 10 years old, my grandparents used to watch the television show Dallas. You remember the show Dallas?
I do remember.
There was J.R. Ewing. And J.R. Ewing was the guy. He was I'd call him the antagonist maybe. But when I was a kid, I would watch my grandparents watch this show. I didn't know a whole lot about what was going on, but what I knew was J.R. Ewing was rich, and he was really rich. And what I would do is I set up a little office in this wooded area across the street from where we lived. And I had this makeshift office where I would actually pretend to be debating with J.R. Ewing about $1 million business deals. And I would just, in my mind, I had this make-believe, pretend kind of thing that I was having this conversation with J.R. Ewing and I would always win.
Yeah.
Well, that laid the foundation for everything that I'm doing today. Now, interestingly enough, because I do believe in divine purpose, that ignited in me my purpose, even though I didn't recognize it at that time. But now in retrospect, I can see how perfect it is. Because everything I do now is based on that conversation that I had with my grandfather and the pretending to be this successful business person when I was a kid.
Yeah. But you actually took, because I read about this in the book, you actually started businesses while you were in high school, right?
Well, actually, when I was 14, I started my first business when I was 14. And here's what happened. I'm walking to school and I hear these two guys arguing. And I was in front of a motorcycle shop. And I hear this guy in the back saying something to the effect of, "It's not my damn job to sweep the floor." And what it was, the mechanic and the manager or the owner were arguing because the mechanic didn't want to sweep the floor. I'm 14 years old. I hear this conversation. I walk into the store. I look at the manager. I say, "Excuse me." I said, "I understand that he doesn't want to sweep the floor, but I'll tell you what, if you give me a job, I'll sweep the floor for him." The guy looked at me and he kind of smiled. He said, "Really?" He says, "Well, how much are you going to charge?" I said, "I'll tell you what, let me clean the floors first, and then you pay me what you think it's worth." 14 years old. This is the conversation I'm having with this guy. Now, this guy was just the coolest guy. He's probably 65, 70 years old, just a real cool guy. So, man, I cleaned those floors like you wouldn't believe. His garage was just spot clean. He looked at me and he said, "Okay, guy, you got the job. Now, here's what I'm going to do." He says, "How often can you come back?" I said, "Well, I get out of school at a certain amount of time. I can come back there." He says, "Okay, so tomorrow I want you to come back." He says, "I'm going to pay you $5 an hour." Now, back then, minimum wage was $1.40 an hour.
Wow, nice.
I remember it was $1.40 an hour. He's paying me $5 an hour. I start cleaning the floors. It just so happens he's got 3 other friends that own garages. Guess who's cleaning their garage?
You are.
There you go. I was there for about 5 months. All of a sudden, this motorcycle shop started selling Yamaha bicycles. The mechanic didn't want to put the bicycles together because he said he was a motorcycle mechanic. Well, I told the guy, "Look, I can put those bicycles together for you," because I could. I could tear down a bicycle and put it back together. Next thing you know, I'm putting together the bicycles, didn't have to clean the floors anymore.
Yeah.
My whole job was just to put together the bicycle. So that was my first business. I was 14 years old.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So, I know that like a lot of kids have this kind of, they'll sell Girl Scout cookies or they'll do lemonade stands and things like that. But not all of them kind of go on to continue to launch new businesses. But you've done that. I mean, your career has kind of moved in a bunch of different places. What is it? Do you think it is about you that actually means like, all right, I'm an entrepreneur? Because like what is it that had you kind of keep growing and starting new businesses?
Well, once again, I go back to divine purpose and the universal intelligence, divine intelligence, because intuitively I've always known what I wanted to do. And as I go back over my life, once I got to high school, a couple of things that I love to do. I loved music. I was a DJ. Had my own equipment and everything. I started a business DJing parties. I did proms and I did parties around town. Another thing that I loved were electronics. I loved installing car stereos. I made tons of money in high school installing car stereos for my friends. I made tons of money. I had kids from different high schools heard about me, and man, they'd hire me, and I was one of the guys who, even in high school, always had cash.
Uh-huh.
And so that part of me, that entrepreneur, again, started at 10.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I trusted that intuition that I was doing what I love to do. not knowing that I was being an entrepreneur, really. I was just what I loved to do. Now, as I grew up, when I was 19 years old, I got a job with a building supply center, climbed the corporate ladder pretty quickly, became the youngest manager in the history of this company, was living the so-called American dream. And I got sidetracked because I was doing the corporate thing. Well, it wasn't until after a divorce, bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep state of depression, I was homeless for 2 years living out of a car, that the universe said, look, you're not doing what you were put on this planet to do.
Bingo.
Sorry, I've got to take some drastic measures to get you back on track.
Yeah.
All those adversities that I just mentioned were simply the universe's way of saying, you're not supposed to be working for somebody else. You're an entrepreneur. Be an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of how I jumped back in it.
Well, I think we've all had those type experiences where we find ourselves off track. I mean, I was just going through my college transcripts recently, and I saw, I was a finance major, began my career in investment banking, venture capital, and I looked at my transcripts, the bare minimum number of business classes. It was all humanities, psychology, religion, philosophy, and so of course, I don't honor really what I care about, and I go into investment banking, and I'm terrible at it. I have zero attention to detail. I mean, if I could get hired as an MD, yeah, I'm sure I'd probably be pretty good at it. But like the guy with the, behind Excel, and so I had a number of those washout experiences early on where there's a deep misalignment, and eventually the universe kind of keeps smacking you until you come back into really who you are and what you're meant to do. So I'm curious, do you have any advice for, Joseph and Christine who are on the line, but also, the folks who are going to watch this later, how do you know that you're hitting those three forms of compensation? How do you know that this is spiritually fulfilling, that's emotionally fulfilling, that obviously financial, it's self-explanatory. You got lots of money, it's financially fulfilling, but how do you know that your venture is the right one?
Well, when I was working for that other company, I started a lot of different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I had a company that part-time, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, they deregulated the telephone industry, which allowed you to buy your own payphones. And so these companies were buying payphones and putting them in their stores. And I came up with an idea saying, you know what, if you're buying a phone, and they had these really ugly wooden boxes, basically, they were putting in. I said, what if you could create some boxes, some booths, if you will, phone booths, that would match the decor of the business that it was in? So I designed this really cool box, and I could do it in tons of different colors using Formica and some other products. And man, I made pretty decent little chunk of change just doing that on the side, just while I was still working for the other company. But to get back to your point, how do I know that this is the right one?
Yeah.
First of all, you have to understand the journey that I've been on. And this journey, since after my divorce, has been a deep dive into self. It has been a deep dive into making peace with my past, healing all my childhood wounds and traumas, looking at my shadows, looking at the things that were keeping me from being authentic to me. Mm-hmm. And so if we aren't willing to do that work, I think it's difficult, if not impossible, for us to really align with and connect with that divine purpose that we have.
Yeah.
Now, for me, one thing that really helped is I learned from Tim Kelly what he called the sacred wound. Mm-hmm. And I was able to identify a sacred wound in which all of my dysfunction was the result of one simple event that occurred when I was 6 years old. When my mom had to take me to live with my dad, who I didn't know. And it was the most traumatizing, most painful experience of my life. That one event, that sacred wound, as painful as it was, as difficult as it was the turning point in my life, because it challenged me even at 6 years old, to get in touch with through my defense mechanisms that were triggered by the trauma. But it taught me how to be self-sufficient. It taught me how to be intelligent. It taught me how to be resilient. It taught me so many lessons. As painful as it was. Now, I believe it's important for us to uncover, discover, wake up to, however you want to say, there's an event that happens in our lives where we make a decision that there's something wrong with us, that we're not good enough. If we can identify and find what that is and heal that, it opens the door. It opens our heart to the connection with the universe, I believe. So the way that I know that I'm doing my purpose is, first of all, I've opened that channel by healing my stuff, but it's also the ease at which I'm able to create. For example, when I'm writing, I get into this zone and it's amazing. It's miraculous. You know, I wrote my first book, my very first book, I wrote the entire book in 90 days. My second book, I wrote the entire book in 32 days.
Wow.
My third book, I wrote in 8 days. And I'm talking 50,000 word books.
Yeah.
Okay? My fourth book I wrote in 14 days. My fifth book I wrote in between 14 and 16, I don't remember. And this book that I've written now, I wrote the entire book in 14 days.
Wow. That's amazing.
Now, it would be arrogant for me to think that I'm just this really smart guy writing books. There's something much bigger than me that's pouring through me. And I say the only reason it's pouring through me is because I cleared the channel for that to happen. And I cleared that channel by doing my inner work. And I think that's one of the challenges that entrepreneurs have, is to be willing to do that inner work. And that's one of the things I focus on in this particular book, because I think it's important.
Yeah. Well, I just want to reflect back what I heard here, because I think this is really important. This is where your world and my world are like deeply intertwined. Is that a lot of our core faculty, like the things about us that we treasure and we value, they get formed from these core wounds. Like, you know, I had something similar happen around 6. You know, it was like I got kind of shamed for, you know, liking and you know, there's something happened for me. Like, I knew that art was sacred, or that, you know, self-expression was sacred, and so to kind of like, you know, like bring it back to, you know, what entrepreneurs are dealing with, because a lot of them, you know, a lot of ones I talk to, my wife, you know, she works with entrepreneurs all day long, is their businesses aren't often connected to really who they are. It's like, it might be a passion, you know, like say for example, you had a passion for electronics. Like, electronics isn't in your like core wounding, right? Like, there's no like, oh, I can't do electronics and therefore I have to be great at it or something like that. But there is stuff in there around resilience. There is stuff in there around like kind of establishing an early level of sovereignty and responsibility that is naturally suited for an entrepreneur. You know, naturally suited. And the second thing I heard that I think it's really important is that if the creative process is flowing through you, then you know you're aligned. But if it feels like a chore, either A, it's the wrong thing, or B, you haven't done the inner work to actually clear the channel so it can flow through you, in a sense. Is that right?
The subtitle is An Entrepreneur's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Profits in Business. You see, most of us, we put the profits first, and we think the profit's going to bring us the joy and the passion. I think that's backwards. Go for the joy first. The profits will follow.
Yeah.
When you connect and align to your purpose and your passion and your joy, your business, see, because I believe if you aren't having fun with your business, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You're doing it wrong. And I mean, you should be having a blast. Now, that doesn't mean it's not challenging, but that's the beauty of, that's the fun part about being an entrepreneur. Shit's going to happen. You're going to have to deal with a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
But it's fun to me. I love that. I love the challenge of dealing with whatever shows up in my business, because I know that I'm equipped to deal with no matter what shows up. I have access to something that can help me resolve whatever issue. Now, another point I want to make real quick, though, when we start talking about doing that inner work, a lot of people think that when you say things like your sacred wound and stuff like that, that you have to have had some traumatic, painful experience. No, a sacred wound could be your dad telling you he's disappointed in you.
Right.
That could be a sacred wound that at that moment you made a decision that something's wrong with you. And so what do? You try to do everything to make him proud of you. So you're working really hard to be successful, and you're doing all these things, and you're driven by this, I want my dad to love me.
Yeah.
See, that's a recipe for disaster, because you're driven by your pain versus your purpose. And so for me, what I had to discover, or what I discovered, was one of the reasons I was so successful early was because of a deep sense of shame that I had, that there was something wrong with me, and what John Bradshaw called toxic shame. Mm-hmm. So I had so much shame in me, the way that I could kind of feel good about myself was by accomplishing things. And there was an emptiness to it all. No matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. And it wasn't until I healed that and got to the place where I can just love myself for me, as me, without accomplishments. Now I'm ready to build on that which is already within me, which is being an authentic entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I want to reflect back like a distinction that comes out of Hindu philosophy and spirituality. Like they talk about being motivated by karma, by stuff that like is unhealed, unprocessed. It's in your subconscious that you're trying to like either distract yourself from or compensate for, or being driven by dharma, which is like that purpose, like what you have to give. So one's kind of like, you know, in the Bay Area, there's lots of karma, like, you know, startups, like, you know, it's like this kind of cult of personality, egos, all that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of folks who have a lot to give, and you know, as you've mentioned, and is evident on the cover of your book, you know, I'm finding that that women and people of color tend to come from this place of I've got something to give, and they for whatever reason they got the message early. They're like, if I'm gonna put my neck out there, if I'm gonna forego a paycheck and, you know, nights and weekends and security and all that kind of stuff, it's got to be personally meaningful, like personally meaningful, not just something I made up because there's a market opportunity, because so-and-so is, you know, is funding it or whatever, but it's like, it's personally meaningful. So I guess I want to ask you, when people kind of start to come into this question, like, oh my God, I'm in business and I haven't done any personal work, and I don't want to just do another, you know, karma enterprise here and like burn myself out so I can maybe one day get a paycheck. Like, what do you suggest they do? Like, if they've never even looked within, but they've been starting businesses or failing or succeeding, it doesn't matter, but like where should they start?
Well, I love what Michael Beckwith said. He says you can either be pushed by pain or driven by a vision. Mm-hmm. Pushed by pain or driven by a vision. So I'm a huge proponent of telling people, especially entrepreneurs, the first thing you want to do, and you can do this while you're running a business, but you got to be willing. You know, one of my favorite sayings is, if you don't go within, you will always go without. True. So we must be willing to go within. And to go within simply means that we get in contact with, connect to not only who we really are, but our emotions and how we feel. See, I was one of those emotionally shut off, above the neck thinkers and logical, rational, and I could figure stuff out and all of that. But I was disconnected from my heart.
Mm.
That's where the power is. Because when we do our work, all that intellect, which is great, it's a tool, nothing wrong with that. But the joy doesn't come from the intellect. The passion doesn't come from the intellect. The creativity doesn't come from the intellect. It comes from a deeper place.
Mm.
If you want to be an entrepreneur and really be successful, you got to get clear on who and what you are. And that's why I think this
So how do they do that?
I'm sorry?
So how do they do that? How do they get clear on who they are and heal those wounds and open up their emotions and all that?
Well, for me, what worked was I gained the courage to go to therapy after my divorce and all of that. And it opened up a door that challenged me, number one, to get in contact and connect to my emotions because I was so disconnected. I remember when I first started the process and I read a book by John Bradshaw and he was helping me getting in touch with my emotions. And I remember he had an exercise where I literally went to a grocery store and I was picking up different types of fruit to feel the texture of the fruit. I went to the refrigerated section and touched the ice cream to feel the cold. And these things helped me reconnect with my feelings. Feelings are the language of the soul and the source of everything. So if you're not connected to that, something's always going to be missing. So we have to be willing to start asking ourselves some deeper questions. Who am I? Why am I here? That first question, who am I, begins with getting in touch with and making peace with your past, I believe. And so you can read all the business books in the world. You can understand spreadsheets and balance sheets and all of that. But if your heart is hurt, guess what will happen? It's going to show up somewhere in your relationships, in your business. Something's going to be off. So there's a lot of people that will take the voyage to India and get in touch with themselves through meditation. I mean, there's countless ways to do it, but the point is we must be willing to go within. And again, a great starting point is simply having that support system where you can share openly and honestly what's going on with you. And that's why masterminds and coaching is so important because it allows you to have a space to open up and release and to break free from some of the things that may be holding you back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Michael. And I would say that probably 90% of the people I work with have already done something like that. They've been in therapy for a couple of years. You know, they're starting to kind of heal the past, starting to feel the feels that they haven't let themselves feel. You know, they do like a Mankind Project weekend or a Woman Within weekend. They really get kind of the fullness of their bodies, their emotions, and like, you know, as you said, those are the languages of the soul. I mean, the soul doesn't like think in terms of, you know, Microsoft drop-down folders. It's like, it's much more effusive and mysterious. So I got a question for you. Like, I know you're going to sell thousands, if not tens of thousands of copies of this book. And what do you see possible with, say, 10, 20,000 people having read your book? And like, what really is going to be the result of in their lives, and also like what's going to be the result in the world when all these people are connected to their purpose, their emotions, their bodies, and moving that into entrepreneurship? Like, what do you see possible?
Well, but let me back up, make one important point. When I got started in this process, so first thing I did, I went to therapy. started dealing with my stuff, but I wasn't really ready to deal with my stuff, really. And then I got involved with Anthony Robbins. And I was the Anthony Robbins champion, the NLP, motivational, and rah, 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 yeah, 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 go, go, go. I mean, I was fired up, absolutely fired up. And that lasted for maybe 2 years. And there was something missing that I couldn't figure out. And it wasn't until I did John Bradshaw's work, that deeper inner child work, because for me, I want you to imagine the worst childhood a child could have. Multiply that by 10. That was my childhood. I mean, it was that traumatic. And so there was a part of me that was actually in denial. When I was doing all the Anthony Robbins stuff and staying motivated, I could get up and give a speech and get people fired up, but there was still some scars that I was unwilling to deal with. Well, when I did John Bradshaw's work and released that trauma, that pain, that's when I got free. I got free from healing that. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of doing that inner work. And everyone has a different experience, obviously. But for me, that's where I got free, because I got to a place of self-love where even if I never sold a book, I'd still be happy. Even if I didn't have a company, I could be happy working for a convenience store because of self-love. I got to a place where I just love me for me. I don't have to do anything anymore. I don't have to prove anything to anybody. So self-love is the foundation, I believe, of everything. So back to your point about the thousands of tens and thousands of people that I hope will get this message. As an optimist that believes that everything is in divine order, and when people are ready, this book will show up in their lives, and it will be that nudge, maybe that impetus for them to really jump out there and do something that they've known they could do but were afraid to do it. And it's really about waking everyone up ultimately to what you teach, which is purpose. Because obviously everybody's not going to be an entrepreneur, but for those people who open their minds and have always had that urge and know internally that they want to do something, don't know how to do it, this is going to be a great wake-up call and a tool that they'll have in their toolkit to be successful. And I believe that when you follow the guidelines in this particular book, it lays the foundation for you to put the joy first, get the passion, and the profits are going to show up. Because again, I believe an entrepreneur can solve every problem facing this planet.
I agree. I also think there's a role for the government as well, but yes.
The government has its place, but I believe what's happening is because, and this is why I say there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur than right now, because the barriers to entry are non-existent now. If you want to be an entrepreneur, there's no reason why you shouldn't become one.
Yes.
You know, it used to be that you had to have a college degree. You know, you go to business school and you get a degree and then you start a business, or you have to have a lot of money to get started. Technology and information has leveled the playing field for everyone. I mean, think about this, Brandon. You and I, when you're in California, I'm in Texas, we're doing this live thing. We can literally reach around the world with our message for what? $15 a month?
No.
That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's what technology is doing. It's giving everyone an opportunity to follow their passion, to create tribes based on what they're passionate about for little to no cost. You know? And then when you look at, you know, it used to be that to be successful in business, it was location, location, location. Well, retail buildings and stores are kind of going to where the dinosaur right now. Why? Everything's online. You want to learn something about running a business? You can go to YouTube and learn, literally anything on YouTube for free. So the barriers to entry to being entrepreneur are gone. They're not there anymore. If you want it, it's there for you. And that's why it's so important for people like you and myself who are spreading this message and are saying, it's possible. Let's do this. And that's what the book is about. Let's do this. Because it's our time as entrepreneurs, because I know we're going to change the world.
Well, yes, very much so. One of the things that I also see really possible, I know that Andy, who just joined us, also feels passionate about social justice, but like, you know, the cover of your book and what is possible when a lot of people kind of wake up to, wait a minute, the barriers to entry are low. I do have to do my inner work and distinguish who I am and heal my wounds and get complete with my past. But can y'all hear me okay? Andy just sent me a note that it was garbled or something. Can you hear me? Hello?
It's just a little quiet for me. I don't know, Michael, if you're hearing that too.
I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right, no worries. But I actually see this as like really a key piece of social justice here. Like, because you know, technology brought down the barriers, and you know, we're now starting to see more and more online ways to distinguish your purpose versus, you know, your default purpose or society, more ways to heal yourself. But I actually see the book as being foundational to having this kind of Benetton ad of success, where you have people across, you know, generations, races, sexual orientations, gender, that we actually have an economy that looks like our people. Because right now, the economy looks like our government. It's pretty white and pretty male. And we can actually have capital look like the population. I mean, that's what I see possible. I mean, does that land for you? Is like,
absolutely. And again, that's why it's important for us to have these types of dialogues to reach the people who are now waking up to these possibilities. Because that's the real challenge. Because we are so inundated with all the negativity and the pessimism and so forth that people can't see beyond what they see on CNN. Well, the only way to see beyond that is to go within.
yeah.
Is to focus your attention on who and what you are, find out what lights you up, figure out a way to monetize that, and get out there and coach people and teach people and empower people to change themselves first, and then go out and change the world.
Yeah.
That's the whole mission.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think what you're offering people is basically a way out and a way through all the dysfunction we're present to right now. Because, like you said, there's just cascade of negativity, you know, coming from the government, media, and we're like, whoa. And what I hear is possible is that, I'm not saying forget the world, but like, if you focus on what's good, you know, your gifts, your contribution, and how not easy it is, but how simple it is actually to get, you know, to move yourself forward into a business. Like this book could be coming at just the right time, when like all of a sudden we're like, the world is probably not very functional, but what I can do is be highly functional as an entrepreneur. And I kind of see this as like a very timely book in that regard.
Well, let's think about enlightenment for a moment. Mm-hmm. So we think of, you know, Eastern philosophy and enlightenment, and you know, the goal was to reach this state of bliss and nirvana. And so basically, maybe you go to the Himalayas, or you're sitting on the mountain and you're meditating and you're connecting with all that is. And once you get there, you're enlightened. Well, see, I think that's the old way of enlightenment. There's what's called evolutionary enlightenment, which means we look at the spiritual journey as going up a mountain. So we go up this mountain, very challenging, very difficult to climb that mountain. When we get to the top of the mountain and we realize, we've made it. Well, that's just half of it. Once we get there, the goal is to get whole, complete, connected with who we are. But then we have to come back down, grab somebody by the hand, and take them back up the mountain with us. Okay? So evolutionary enlightenment says enlightenment isn't just about getting to a state of bliss and going, I made it and I don't have to worry about nobody else. Evolutionary enlightenment says, what can I do to empower other people to become empowered with me? And that's why I write, because I want to come back down that mountain. I want to grab people by the hand. I want to pull them back up the mountain and then have them go, yeah, I get it. Okay, let's go back down together. Next thing you know, we got 2 people coming back up. And that's how for me, that's how humanity evolves. We do our work. We teach others how to do their work. We all keep working, and guess what? Pretty soon, before you know it, heaven on earth.
Heaven on earth. That's right. Michael, I just want to reflect like how refreshing and positive you have always been, regardless of what's happening in the world. That you're just like, I get it, and I'm pouring my light in. Like I'm pouring my light in. So we're gonna have to move to a close here pretty soon, but I want to give Christine or Andy or Joseph an opportunity to ask any questions of Michael. Anything that's got stirred up in you as we were talking that you want to bring forth. I had more, but.
Well, I showed up right when you were talking about self-love, which is something that's very dear to my heart. Michael, what do you think gets in the way? I mean, you talked a little bit about your own personal story, but what do you think is, and I know it's hard to generalize with billions of people, but what do you think gets in the way of people loving themselves and sharing that love?
From my experience, and I'll use the term ego, and I see ego not as a thing that we have. Ego is a part of us. It's a collective consciousness that we hold. And what happens is, from my experience, is the ego's job is to protect us. That's its job. So when we experience pain, when we experience trauma, the ego's job is to support you and keep you from falling to pieces. Okay? So we start developing these defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. That's the ego's job. And so the goal or the key is to recognize those defense mechanisms and how they've served their purpose, but recognize that we have to be willing to wake up from that. And actually, look at it this way. Imagine that in your mind, there's two yous. There's what I call the little s self and the big S self. 2 yous, though, they're in a room. And there's this cot, okay? When you're born, you are your true, authentic self, okay? Your ego self is laying on the cot. You're standing there in all your magnificence and your glory. But then, shit happens. Life happens. The authentic you changes places with the you on the couch, which is your ego. So you're laying on the couch, your ego stands up. It's now running the show because it's protecting you, okay? So little s self is the ego. Big S self is laying on the couch, but that's who you are, okay? As we grow up, we have to learn how to recognize the ego and coach him to get on the couch, and then the authentic self stands up and controls the show. For most people, the little s self is always controlling the show. It's the ego controlling the show. So self-love is the process of setting the ego down on the couch and standing in all your magnificence. Recognizing that part of you is still there. It has to be there. It's a part of you. So self-love occurs when the ego's laying down, you're standing up in all of your glory.
I love that visual. I'm reminded, Brandon, I think you posted a page from Elizabeth Gilbert's book where she said the ego makes a wonderful servant but a horrible master. Yeah. Which is kind of similar. That's a cool visual of the standing up. Thank you.
A lot of people see the ego as a bad thing. Ego's not a bad thing. It's just a problem.
Quite necessary for our survival, yes.
Michael, I should also share that Andy's been trained at the True Purpose Institute with Tim Kelly as well. So I know that Michael's done a bunch of work with Tim.
Awesome, yeah.
So so we have to move to a close. So Michael, how do we find out more about the new face of entrepreneurship? How do we support it? How do we stay connected with you and your tribe?
Well, what's awesome right now is we're doing a crowdfunding campaign for the book. And I'll send you the link, or maybe Brandon, I've always sent you the link, and maybe you can post it somewhere where they can access the link. It'll take them right to the crowdfunding page. And from there, once you sign up, you'll be a part of my tribe already, and you'll see everything that's going on and be able to stay connected.
Cool. All right, I will do that. And if they just want to find out about you in general, what's your website?
CoachMichaelTaylor.com.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. And Michael, I'm so excited for this book. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, this is how perfect the universe is, because what you're doing is you're really giving me some great insights, and I appreciate your support in me and being a partner with me and making sure that it's the best book it can possibly be. And I honor you and I thank you for supporting me.
You got it. Bye.
All right, take care.
Nice to meet you.
All right, take care, Andy.